Greetings, Guardians. My name is Bife here. In the last few days, we've been closely examining the acolytes of Nezarec with the intent of discerning any information we can about their practices and the power of their master. Nezarec might not directly control the acolytes, but they have all universally had an experience or two that puts them in contact with him. Most of these events have been scarring, terrifying, and often life-changing. It is clear that for some, such as Acacia's Scion partner, the exchange can be deadly. But there are some others with potentially even more to lose. Granted, for some it may simply be the soundness of their mind or their sleep, and this isn't as large a deal as for those who will have to give their life. In the case of our next tale today, it would be almost everything. It would be sight, it would be sanity, and it would even be the potential of all the lives that they could have given. Today, we're learning about what it is to be truly driven by torment and rage. This is the story of a Lightbearer and their interactions with Nezarec. Now, I say Lightbearer because of the context clues given within the story, which lead me to believe that this individual might not have been a Guardian and might have existed before that time. I say Lightbearer, but there's an even further distinction that I think we can make. For those that don't know, early Lightbearers back in the days of the Dark Ages would self-sort by other monikers. Some were simply, as was stated, Lightbearers, working only for themselves and nobody else, but also not making great claims to power, simply embracing the immortality that they had gained in this new world. This best describes the characters such as the Drifter. Then there were the Iron Lords, who took it upon themselves to defend the people of Earth across all the lands that they could control. Lord Saladin Forge is a good example of this. Finally, there were those that the Iron Lords would oppose, the Warlords. Warlords would specifically use their guardian powers for personal gain and would often selfishly and ruthlessly claim a large tract of land within which they would act as kings or chieftains. These small fiefdoms were found all over Earth in the early days of the Dark Age, and whilst some, such as Lord Shaxx, would treat their subjects with a little bit more of an open and fair hand, others would be tyrannical and cruel. These acts did not go unnoticed. Nezarec knew of these moments. He was aware of every injustice dealt by the Warlords and every slight that they had performed against others. He even says as much in our encounter with him in the raid. Take a listen.
Lightbearers have always seemed efficient at creating their own chaos. Your warlords did a masterful job of that. Do you enjoy hearing the final screams of your enemies? Screams are the most delicious when they're wrenched directly from the throat. An echo that reverberates through eternity. Oh, beautiful.
It's not known how many warlords Nezarec may have haunted in his time before we found him, but Nezarec's gaze would fall on one warlord in particular. His name was Briar, and his story tells us of one of the greatest results of Nezarec's torment. It also stands as a stark reminder of his danger even to Guardians and Lightbearers, even in his deceased state of being. The Dark Age was after Nezarec's pyramid ship crashed on the moon, and after he was killed and betrayed by Savathun. So it's worth noting that even in his current deceased state, after having died a second time, an event like this that we're about to read about is not out of the question. Take a listen to the lore from the Agony Armor set from the Root of Nightmares raid. It reads as follows. Acolytes of Nezarec, Briar. The weight of the forest's darkness pressed down on me. Adrenaline pumped through me as I watched my opponent fall. I listened for the thud as their body collided with the ground. Deep crimson painted a nearby tree, sliding down through bark and seeping into wood sap. The excess pooling on the ground to soak in the dead pine needles. I don't remember who it was, or why I had chosen to slay them. In the past, I had seen my fair share of bloodshed, killed indiscriminately. If you saw another day in my lands, it was because I willed it. But this felt different. Up ahead, shadows shifted in the sea of trees. I braced myself, sword held steady. Shivers traveled up my fingertips, electrified my arms, and settled as a chill on the back of my neck. "Who's there?" I could hear whispers all around me, from behind every tree. It was overwhelming, all-encompassing, indecipherable. The shadow swiftly closed the distance between us until it towered over me. It reached for me and I stepped back. I remember the sinister laugh, the way it touched a primal fear deep within me. I was paralyzed, my mind flooded with whispers. Its wispy body lurched forward and slammed through me. I felt myself fall. The wind left my lungs, and for a moment, there was nothing. An emptiness the likes of which I had never felt before. The cycle remained the same, but my actions were not my own. My blade felt heavier with each battle. I did not recognize the shadow attached to me. I did not recognize myself. Did I even know who I was to begin with? The shouts and pleas of my enemies reverberated in the air, my skin burned and my heart pounded harder than a hammer striking an anvil. My head was filled with a dense fog. I was present but lost. My adversary fell to the ground, gasping for air. I fixed my eyes on their face, and a breathy, animalistic snarl escaped my lips. It lingered in the air like a haunting song. Beneath it was that laugh. His laugh. I fell to my knees, stained them in the crimson that had pooled beneath my boots. I dropped my sword and lifted my shaky hands up to my eyes. The fresh blood ran down my fingers, forming a tapestry in the palm lines. I saw his face in the pattern, felt the weight of his hands on my shoulders, on my mind. I screamed. These next 3 entries are all taken from times that are a little bit more spaced apart. Briar is still being haunted by Nezarec. Entry 3 begins as follows. You are mine. My threaded silk sheets were no longer a comfort. Instead, they felt like gravel against my skin. Every twist and turn yielded pain. The lit candle beside my bed did not ease my mind. I turned onto my back, eyes trained on the ceiling to avoid the shadows dancing in the candlelight's orange glow. As I sunk into my pillow, I felt as though it would eventually suffocate me. It could not grant me solace from the whispers. They were always present, like white noise, at least until he required my attention. Bring me more. Groans of pain and agony poured into my room. Each corner shifted and warped in ways I could only attribute to that fateful day in the woods. I was paralyzed by the weight of it all. The flame at the tip of the wick flickered weakly as it neared the bottom of the holder where the wax pooled. Numerous claws and black tendrils inched their way toward my bed. You will never be free. I cried out as solar energy burst forth. The hammer was warm in my grasp. I leapt from my bed, slammed the fiery weapon down into the floorboards. I felt the heat intensifying as flames licked at every surface they could find. The shadows still danced, still reached for me. I tried to burn them away. Wood splintered and cracked as everything fell apart. My screams drowned in the destruction of my home. I did not ask for help, I shouted. Rage coursed through me. My knife was stained red. I shouldn't have been able to see it. Any of it. But here I was, staring back at my ghost. "You need your sight," Firethorn returned. His voice was laced with concern, something I ignored in the moment, but would remember for years to come. "This is not up to you. He preys upon my vision." I stepped forward, and Firethorn floated up to meet my gaze. The blade in my hand shook as a faint whisper tickled the back of my mind. "Do it." I shouted, covered my ears. I could see shapes forming in the darkness of the tree line again. I couldn't take it anymore, but I knew Firethorn would only continue to heal me. "You need to snap out of this," Firethorn pushed. "You're losing control. Where is the great Briar of the Wild Brambles?" "Dead." "The thorn that pierced the heart of would-be gods." "A puppet." "Pain and terror were your symphony." "My symphony." "What's become of—" I remember how easily my hand wrapped around him, how I forced him to the ground and pierced his lens with my knife. I hadn't realized what I had done until I saw the light flicker out of his eye. Firethorn's pieces were the last thing I saw before succumbing to permanent darkness. For those of you who haven't picked up on the context clues, this is a moment where, just earlier, Briar had cut out his own eyes. His ghost had continuously regenerated them to heal him, thus restoring his sight. But Briar, possessed by Nezarec, didn't want his sight. Nezarec preyed on his vision, and when the ghost did not understand, Briar killed him. The campfire crackled and echoed throughout the cave. I reached toward it, allowing the warmth to guide me. The man across from me had remained silent throughout my recollection. "You carry the scent of him, of Nezarec." "As do you, Briar of the Wild Brambles," the man said. The title felt unfamiliar as it left his lips. Was I deserving of that moniker? It felt long gone. "It's faint, but still there." "Was that the reason you've sought me out?" There was a long pause. Then I heard him shuffle around for something in his bag. "My family has been in Nezarec's favor for generations," he said. I defensively gripped my walking stick, ready to draw my blade if necessary. Then I heard the thud of a heavy object, and after a few seconds, the sound of pages turning. He spoke again. "Our experiences will not be the last." The pages continued to turn, just loud enough for me to hear over the crackle of the fire. "Do you wish to feel his full power again?" the man asked. Deep down, I felt an instantaneous yes ring loud and true. I'd spent so long fearing his influence, the sheer terror he amplified within me. But when he was gone, all that remained was a void, an all-consuming vacuum of terror. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. I had no way of definitively knowing, but something told me the man was smiling. I think the thing that really haunts me about the Agony Armor set's lore is the vivid description of fear that's given at the end. Not because it's something which perfectly displays the moment of fear, but instead the way it displays a certain understanding of fear as something that of course in the moment is paralyzing and terrifying and powerful, but after the matter, it becomes changed. When we look at fear, we see something that repels us and yet also, strangely, it fulfills us, it attracts us. I think it's naturally a human thing to be curious about experiencing sensations over and over again. And in a strange way, I imagine that this is the case for fear. Nezarek's terror is something that one craves after having been deprived of it for so long. It's kind of similar to the way that sometimes fear operates for us. Whilst we might shriek away from terror, there's always a part of us that inquires into it again, which tries its hardest to make its way back to the source of that fear. You can be unbelievably afraid of spiders or sharks or anything in between, and yet that doesn't mean that every once in a while a grim fascination doesn't occasionally take over. It's inexplicable, but there's something visceral about the feeling that is so well described by the writer here. Something that was really unnerving. Very well done. When Briar internally feels compelled to say yes in his own heart, as Michael asks if he wishes to experience Nezarec again, there's something greater at play. Perhaps it's powers like these that led to the enthrallment of the Acolytes in the first place, and perhaps it's what led to the entire Scion people worshipping Nezarec. Perhaps the enrapturing nature of fear is in fact the greatest power of the final god of pain. Something that allows him to get away with drawing in acolytes even after he has taken their sight, their ghosts, their friends, their homes, even their ways of life. It's also worth noting on the note of acolytes that I'm presuming yet again that this is Michael, and presuming again that this book that they draw is yet again of Hated Nezarec, the same tome that is referenced at the very end of every single group of readings about the Acolytes of Nezarec, whether it is Caraxes' or Briar's or Acacia's. As for Briar himself, it seemed that he joined with the Acolytes of Nezarec, much like Caraxes did. We can kind of tell that given the flavor text of the weapon from the Root of Nightmares raid that bears his name, Briar's Contempt. The flavor text of that weapon reads, "You will never be rid of him. Briar, Acolyte of Nezarec." This shows that Briar did indeed join. Michael's choir is evidently growing, but the endeavors of Michael and his acolytes are not seemingly just to grow the cult and to praise Nezarec and to try and return him to his physical form. They also seek out items of power that concern Nezarec. This would lead one such acolyte to cross paths with a familiar roguish face. Next time when we cover Raid Lore, we may well be talking about the story of the fourth tomb of Nezarec, and what an old drifter recovered there. But that's all from me for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, go ahead and leave a like, and of course, leave your own thoughts down below in the comments section. If you want more Destiny lore content, go ahead and hit subscribe, and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. But as per usual, know that your viewership as always is quite enough for me, and that in the meantime, my name is Bife. Per audacia ad astra. I'll see you, Starside.